you all said that this was a strong earthquake, yet it's pretty normal for this area. I was wondering if you could put this earthquake in context, kind of historically. When was the last time this region saw this magnitude of earthquake? And yeah.
Sure. So this area does have frequent earthquakes. The last significant earthquake in this area was the Ferndale earthquake in 2022. That released significantly less energy. It was a magnitude 6.4. There are also some other magnitude 6 to 7 earthquakes, 2021 and 2016. In 1992, there was a magnitude 7.2 earthquake in this area. So this is an area where sort of, every few years or a few decades, there's a significant earthquake of this time. The largest one we've seen in the last century or so is a magnitude 7.4 in 1922. And it's interesting to note that there are many sort of flavors of earthquakes here. As I mentioned, the complex tectonic system there. Some have a lot of vertical motion. In 1992, the coastal mountain ranges and the coast were actually uplifted quite a bit. In this case, we don't expect a lot of that sort of on-land change. The main effect of this type of earthquake is the strong shaking that Bob described.
Yeah, and to give you some perspective, the event back in 2022, the magnitude 6.4 that Steve mentioned, this particular earthquake was on the order of 8 times bigger than that event in 2022. So.
Great, thanks you guys. Next question from Lizzie Acker. Please name and affiliation.
Hi, my name is Lizzie Acker, and I'm a reporter for the Oregonian in Portland. I had 2 quick questions. Bob, you said, I just want to verify that you said 500,000 people received alerts on their phone?
At least 500,000, and we're waiting for more reports from our other alert delivery partners, but we know from our initial report from the MyShake, our alert delivery provider, MyShake, they delivered over 500,000 alerts to subscribers to this particular alerting product.
Awesome. And then can you tell me, do you know how many of those were in Oregon? Clearly I have an Oregon.
That's a very difficult question to answer because they don't necessarily break it down by state, but you consider there were 2 fairly large cities that were affected, Eugene and Corvallis, with sizable populations, both have universities. And then it's likely as far east as folks on the other side of the Cascades in Bend may have also received alerts as well. That they were kind of on the edge of that. And just to maybe put a little bit of an accent to this too, is that there are many flavors of alerts that are delivered. There's one type of alert from the wireless emergency alert system. It's the same system that delivers Amber alerts to cell phones. And those alerts were delivered as far north into Oregon as far north as Bandon.
Wow. And then my second question, I guess that was my first 2-part question, is the shaking you described, was that all in California or was any felt in Oregon? Do you know?
Yeah, so in order for alerts to be delivered into places like Corvallis and Eugene and in those regions, the experience, the estimated shaking, this is very important, is the shake alert system estimates the shaking using about 1 second worth of data initially to make that estimate. What the estimated shaking for people on Corvallis and Eugene might have been something on the order of a heavy truck passing by your house. That's intensity 3. So it's sort of like those vibrations. You wonder, like, what was that? That's just happened? Was it a car? Was it whatever? But that's the estimated shaking, and that's where we begin to tell people that something is going on and that they need to take that protective action, drop cover, and hold on. And you may ask the question, well, why do we tell people for such small amounts of shaking for an earthquake like this? Well, it's exactly something like this. Earthquakes can grow in size. And so our goal is to make sure to get alerts to people. We prioritize the people who need the alerts the most, who could feel the heaviest shaking, but also get alerts to people to give them time to take that protective action if the earthquake continues to grow in size and the shaking gets to be stronger.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next questions. There's five people currently with their hands up and one in the chat. So I just want to ask you to ask a question, and then we'll come back to you for more questions if you have one. But next up is Hannah Hagman. Name and affiliation.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm with the San Francisco Chronicle. I have a clarifying question. At the last press conference, which was super helpful, I asked a question about the earthquake that occurred near Cobb, California, which was initially estimated in the 5 to 6 range. And then Christine Gould mentioned that it was a much smaller event, and then it, quote, reassessed to a 2.5 magnitude. My colleague brought up that on the USGS site, I think that's still a higher number. So I just wanted to follow up. Is that accurate that it was reassessed at a 2.5 magnitude?
It was. I perhaps to refresh the page, but the number was adjusted to magnitude 2.5.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Okay. Could I ask one more question, Paul, or you want to come back to me?
A quick question.
Okay. Just Stephen, I was really interested in the science aspect you're talking about on how this earthquake occurred. Can you just also like clarify? So it sounds like we understand this to be there was right lateral motion on the fault, and there was more. Can you talk about the horizontal versus vertical and the difference in damage? I'm really interested in that.
Sure, and I'll just say this is all a little bit preliminary. We do continue to do analyses on the data to make sure we know exactly how these faults move. But based on the history of how earthquakes in this area occur and our current understanding of the data, this is a fault that trends east to west offshore Northern California, just south of Eureka area. Petrolia is the nearest populated place, which is a little town just south of Eureka in the mountains. And there's two sort of different parts of the Pacific plate. So the oceanic crust underwater, and the plate to the north, the Gorda plate, is moving to the east underneath North America, and it's moving faster than the plate to the south. And so because of that, this difference in velocity is accommodated on this Mendocino fault. And in this case, it appears that the fault, the earthquake, is what we call right lateral. So the plate to the north moves farther to the right. If you're standing on the fault, that's what it would look like if you're down there on the floor of the ocean. And so, this is largely horizontal motion. And this is similar to the San Andreas fault, which is the most famous fault in California, has earthquakes, and those largely have horizontal motion. So they generate a lot of shaking, but it's not like one piece of land goes way up higher than the other. And there are other faults, for example, the Cascadia subduction zone to the north. That's the long fault that traces offshore the entire distance up into offshore Canada. And that one tends to have a lot of vertical motion because it's actually one plate diving under another. So in this case, two plates sliding back against one another, and largely horizontal motion. And so that is less likely to lift up the water and create a tsunami than if the ground actually moved vertically quite a bit.
Yeah, imagine taking a cup of water and a knife and sort of slicing through the cup of water, and nothing really moves. The knife just sort of goes through, and that no water's moved really.
Yep.
Great, thank you for that analogy and that explanation. Next up is Monica Woods. Affiliation, please.
Hi there, Monica Woods, ABC 10 in Sacramento. Thanks again for doing this follow-up presser. I want to put into context and perspective, perhaps, that this was an offshore earthquake 7.0. A lot of people reaching out to us that they were in the 1989 San Francisco one, which was smaller. So what are the similarities and the differences in an offshore earthquake or a landmass earthquake?
So the things that really affect how much shaking people feel is how far they are from where the earthquake is generated and how deep that earthquake is in the crust. So in this case, the earthquake is not particularly deep. We're still working on a good estimate, but it's on the order of 10 to 20 kilometers deep, but it's fairly far offshore. So if the earthquake happens farther away, there's less shaking. And in the case of the 1989 earthquake, it occurred underneath the Santa Cruz Mountains in the Bay Area, and the shaking radiated under a lot of urban areas And a lot of the damage was due to things like weak soils and liquefaction. And so this, because it's farther offshore, farther from populated places, we just don't anticipate the sort of humanitarian effects that we see from these earthquakes that occur under the land.
Great, thank you, Steve. Next up, Tara or Tara.
Hi there, it's Tara Duggan from the San Francisco Chronicle, another Chronicle person. I appreciate it. Just wanted to get a little more information about the tsunami warning and why it was, first announced and then changed. It sounds like you kind of addressed that a little bit with the science earlier, but could you go into that a little more in detail?
I think it's important to emphasize that NOAA is the agency that handles the tsunami warning. So we're not really privy to that system. We see that as they are issued. But certainly an earthquake that's this energetic offshore underwater is something that is going to be a cause for concern for tsunamis. And it's possible that some of the initial estimates of motion made it look like there was a possibility of a tsunami. And once those were refined, the chances of a tsunami actually went down. And so that's a little bit speculative, but that's our current understanding of things. And that could be updated as we continue to look at these data.
Okay, thank you. So you don't think it had perhaps anything to do with the type of earthquake it might have been, or which fault it was exactly coming from?
Yeah, we try to agencies, and we, like I said, NOAA is a different agency than USGS. They try to react quickly and send out warnings based on the best available information at that time. And so the initial information to them obviously looked like there was a probability of a tsunami that was high enough to issue a warning, and that was refined later as more information came in. So this is how these systems work sometimes.
Okay, thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Cron TV, you're on. Okay, we're not hearing you. I saw your mic came undone, but I'm not hearing you yet. Okay, you might want to check the mic settings in. I'm going to go ahead and move to Ravenna right now, Cron, but check your mic settings in the settings box there. Ravenna, and affiliation, please.
Yeah, hi, Ravenna Koenig, NPR. I joined about 2 minutes late, so apologies if you answered this, but you had said that, in places there was intensity 8, there could be slight damage to well-designed structures, common structures receiving considerable damage. How widespread would you expect those impacts to be, and where, would you expect to see them?
Well, Steve, you want to take that question? Or is that,
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. So yeah, so one thing that we know is think of an earthquake as like dropping a rock into a lake and you have the waves sort of moving away. And typically we see the highest levels of shaking closest to the epicenter of that earthquake. Of course, the epicenter of this event was off the coast, like 40 miles off the coast of California. So we see by observation on the event page as well, the heaviest levels of shaking, the intensity 8, where you're getting damage to structures closest to basically the coastline. So you're talking Eureka, Arcata, sort of those cities that are sitting, Humboldt Bay region, where people are right along the coast. And of course, the intensities decrease the farther you get away from that event. And there are some exceptions to that. And Steve was mentioning this earlier. In the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, even though it occurred in the Santa Cruz Mountains, we still saw some really intense shaking in places like West Oakland, especially the freeway, the cypress structure that collapsed, and also in the Marina District. There are sort of site conditions, loose soils, that actually make seismic waves slow down and get bigger when they hit those softer soils. So you see some of those differences, but generally what you can say, and on the event page, you can see the highest levels of shaking that are closest to where the epicenter of the earthquake is off the coast.